Welcome back. Before we dive into the details, here's our roadmap for today's masterclass. We'll begin by understanding the Agile paradigm shift and how Scrum replaces traditional command and control thinking with self-management and empiricism. Next, we'll explore the 3 Scrum Accountabilities and the common PMP exam traps associated with each role. Then we'll decode Scrum artifacts and their commitments using the lock and key rule. Finally, we'll bring everything together with a practical 6-point Agile filter, a simple decision framework you can apply to confidently solve PMP situational questions. By the end of this lesson, you'll know not only what Scrum is, but how PMI expects you to think when answering Agile exam scenarios.
Welcome to Infinite Business Dynamics. Right now we're diving into a very specific mission. We're going to actively unlearn those traditional, deeply ingrained project management habits you might be holding on to, and completely decode the Scrum mindset for the PMP exam. Because look, if you want to conquer situational exam challenges and truly master Agile environments, you've absolutely got to abandon predictive reflexes. You need a whole new way of thinking. So consider this masterclass your ultimate blueprint to doing exactly that.
Here's our chronological blueprint for today's explainer. First, we'll establish the environment with the Agile paradigm shift. Second, we'll identify the players in mastering Scrum accountabilities. Third, we'll define their strict tools in decoding artifact commitments. And finally, number 4, we'll wrap up with the ultimate decision-making tool, the 6-point Agile filter.
Section 1. The Agile Paradigm Shift. Unlearning Command. Okay, let's dive into this.
Because to succeed, the absolute first thing we need to address is the necessity of abandoning those command and control reflexes. See, experienced traditional project managers consistently struggle with Scrum concepts. Why? Because they're relying on professional instincts developed in predictive environments. In a traditional setup, you've got a push system, right? A director sits at the top of a hierarchy, pushing top-down directives and daily tasks onto subordinates to get things done. But Scrum replaces this entirely. In the Agile reality, we use a pull system. Developers are self-managing professionals. Literally, no one is assigning them daily work. Instead, they pull work based on their actual capacity. They coordinate task allocation and technical implementation completely internally. Leadership is decoupled from positional authority, and those top-down directives are swapped out for collective accountability.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core engine that makes all this self-management possible: empiricism. Rather than a manager pulling the strings, Scrum relies on continuous loops of transparency, inspection, and adaptation. It's like a system of self-correcting feedback loops. This right here is exactly what you need to look for in correct exam options. You want the answers that favor empirical learning and team autonomy over top-down directives.
Moving on to Section 2, Mastering Scrum Accountabilities. Let's look at mastering the core roles.
So to pass the exam and honestly to function properly in the real world, you have to draw strict, completely non-negotiable borders around each role. Let's start with the Scrum Master. We really need to redefine this role because it gets heavily misunderstood. Fun fact for you, in the early Agile days, the Scrum Master was actually meant to be a rotating role, not some lifelong title. The Scrum Master does not manage people. They don't assign work. They are the guardian of the framework. Their entire existence is built around enabling effectiveness through coaching, facilitation, and fostering continuous improvement. Basically, they're the architects of enablement. They manage the environment the people work in, removing systemic organizational impediments, not the people themselves.
Now, even with that clear understanding, it is so easy to fall into exam traps. If an exam option has the Scrum Master ticking over task assignment to save a failing sprint, writing performance reviews, or approving leave, well, that's the manager trap. The title changed, sure, but that command and control mindset hasn't. Another massive red flag, the Agile secretary trap. If you see an answer reducing the Scrum Master to someone whose main job is just scheduling meetings, updating Jira boards, or taking notes, run the other way. Literally, run. These actions might seem helpful on the surface, but they actually keep the team in a state of administrative dependency. On the exam, you must choose options that focus on enabling over directing.
Next up, notice the pivot dynamic we're looking at here with the product owner. A lot of people mistakenly think the product owner is just a spokesperson for whichever customer is yelling the loudest. But they aren't merely a customer representative. The product owner is the single individual accountable for maximizing the value of the product. Imagine a scenario where marketing demands a feature, but, cybersecurity and regulators also have urgent needs. The product owner acts as the central pivot on a seesaw. They have to balance customer needs against business strategy, operational risks, and technical constraints. Stakeholders can influence, sure, and customers absolutely provide input, but the product owner alone decides the backlog ordering. Period.
Then we have the developers. And keep in mind, in Scrum, developer is a completely profession-neutral term. It doesn't just mean a software programmer. It means any value creator. A tester, a UX designer, a technical writer, really anyone contributing to the increment. Developers hold exclusive accountability for the how of the sprint goal. They're cross-functional, they're entirely self-managing, they handle their own daily sprint backlog updates, and they collectively own the quality of the work.
I want you to lock this memory map right into your brain for exam day. First, regarding quality, there's absolutely no separate QA department inspecting work at the very end of a phase. Quality is built in continuously and the developers collectively own it. Second, regarding estimation. If a scenario ever suggests the Scrum Master or product owner is estimating the technical effort, it is a trap, 100% of the time. The product owner clarifies the value, but the developers estimate the effort because they're the ones who actually understand the technical dependencies. Put simply, those who build it estimate it.
Section 3. Decoding Artifact Commitments. Let's move to this and see how it builds on what we just learned. Because knowing the roles is really only half the battle, right? You also have to understand the exact tools they're accountable for. There is a hidden truth to the PMP exam. Every single Scrum artifact has exactly one associated commitment acting as its key. You cannot have one without the other because without a commitment, an artifact is just a glorified wish list. We call this the lock and key rule. The product goal locks securely to the product backlog, and that is owned by the product owner. The sprint goal locks to the sprint backlog, and that is owned strictly by the developers. And finally, the definition of done locks to the increment. Never mix these up. You can't tie a sprint goal to a product backlog, and a product owner definitely cannot swoop in and micromanage the sprint backlog. Accountability cannot be delegated, and it cannot be overridden. So the crucial point here is understanding the definition of done. It is not just some loose, nice-to-have guideline. It's a strict, non-negotiable quality gate operating right now in the present moment. It basically answers one simple question. Can we confidently say this specific piece of work is complete and usable? If you see an exam scenario where, say, a product owner asks a developer to rush a high-priority feature and just skip testing for now, the correct resolution is always that quality cannot be compromised for speed. The definition of done must be maintained no matter what.
Section 4. The 6-Point Agile Filter. Your diagnostic playbook. All right, now we arrive at the climax of our explainer. This is your ultimate diagnostic playbook and triage board for absolutely any tricky situational exam challenge they throw your way. Whenever you face a scenario that seems super ambiguous, I want you to pause, take a breath, and run the proposed solution through this precise 6-point checklist. Number 1, who owns this decision? Make sure you aren't crossing those strict accountability borders. Number 2, who holds the accountability here? Number 3, does the answer actively support the team's self-management, or is someone trying to manage people instead of enabling them? Number 4, does it maximize product value? Number 5, does it preserve empiricism, meaning are we relying on transparency, inspection, and adaptation? And number 6, does it respect our Scrum commitments like that lock and key rule we just discussed? If an exam option violates any of these 6 principles, just toss it out. It is almost certainly the wrong move.
Because ultimately, this entire filter, and really the whole PMP exam expectation, boils down to the 10th golden rule of PMI. Choose collaboration over control, coaching over command. Listen, this isn't just a catchy corporate slogan. It is the absolute bedrock attitude and the beating heart of the Agile mindset. Any exam option that violates this, maybe by inserting a manual intervention into an autonomous process or by showing a lack of trust in a team's self-management, is incorrect. Period.
You've spent years building your career on structure, directing workflows, and managing every detail. But if you rely on those exact instincts for the 2026 PMP exam, you're walking straight into a trap. In traditional project management, managers push tasks downward. You define the schedule, you assign the work, and you dictate exactly who does what on any given Tuesday. This diagram illustrates the shift. On the left, a rigid hierarchy. On the right, the entire system relies on cross-functional self-management. Notice those continuous circular loops? Nobody waits for directives. Teams pull work relying on 3 pillars: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. trading top-down directives for a system that enables empiricism is what it takes to pass the exam and survive real-world project scenarios. To get this right, we have to throw out your old organizational charts. In Scrum, traditional management titles mean nothing, and authority is distributed entirely differently across 3 specific accountabilities. Take the product owner. They are the sole decider of product value and priorities. If you see an exam option where the product owner just blindly takes orders from a demanding stakeholder, cross it out immediately. They own the what and the why. Then there's the Scrum Master. This visual maps out their true position, an inverted triangle where they serve the team from the bottom up. They don't assign tasks. They act as the guardian of the framework, clearing obstacles and coaching the team toward greater effectiveness. The exam loves to test this by offering answers where the Scrum Master takes meeting minutes or penalizes team members for missing daily events. Remember, they are facilitators and servant leaders, not secretaries or process cops. Finally, the developers. This graphic breaks down a massive misconception. The umbrella covers testers, technical writers, UX designers, and anyone else creating a usable increment. The term is completely profession neutral. Because the team is cross-functional, quality isn't handed off to a separate QA department at the end of a sprint. It is owned collectively. And as these puzzle pieces show, because the developers understand the technical complexity, they are the only ones permitted to estimate the effort required to do the work. When you sit down for the test, use these boundaries as a filter. If a multiple choice option has a Scrum Master assigning work or a product owner estimating technical complexity, you know immediately it's a trap. Now look at how those roles track their work. These function as information radiators, active tools designed specifically to maximize transparency. This diagram maps out the 3 Scrum artifacts: the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the increment. Notice how each artifact has a locked-in commitment. The product backlog is bound to the product goal. The sprint backlog is tied to the sprint goal. And that brings us to the increment, which carries the strictest commitment of all, the definition of done. This is the exact standard that proves the work is complete, tested, and actually usable. There is a sharp division of power here. Hitting the definition of done is a technical state achieved by the developers, but actually releasing that increment to the market, that is a strategic business call made exclusively by the product owner. If an exam scenario tempts you to rush a highly requested feature out the door by bypassing the definition of done, reject it. Compromising an artifact's transparency is always a failing move. You're going to face convoluted situational questions where every single multiple choice option sounds completely plausible. To survive them, you need a precise mental triage system. We call this the decision hierarchy. First, does the option protect the people and respect their accountabilities? Then, does it support the team's self-management? Next, does it preserve empiricism and transparency? Only when those baselines are met do you evaluate which option maximizes long-term value. Let's test it. Imagine you are midway through a crucial sprint, and a VIP customer suddenly demands a major new feature immediately. The hierarchy immediately rules out panicking or letting a manager force the work into the current sprint. Instead, it guides you to facilitate a collaborative discussion, protect the current sprint goal, and absolutely maintain the definition of done. This graphic gives you the ultimate checklist to memorize. Before locking in any answer, ask yourself, are the developers organizing their own work? Is quality being built in? Is accountability shared collectively across the team? When you find yourself stuck between 2 tricky answers, let this be your guide. The correct PMP choice will always empower the team, respect strict boundaries, and choose collaboration over control. In a predictable environment, a highly structured top-down system works flawlessly. But when you apply sudden, shifting pressure to that same rigid framework, the entire mechanism just completely locks up. If you are an experienced project manager, you have likely spent years honing your ability to direct top-down, predictive workflows. That expertise is highly valuable in the real world, but on the PMP exam, it is a massive liability. The exam evaluates your situational judgment. The writers do this by hiding traditional management vocabulary inside complex agile scenarios, specifically to bait your predictive reflexes into choosing the wrong answer. This graphic shows the distinction you must make. Left is the traditional command and control hierarchy. Right is empiricism, continuous loops of transparency, inspection, and adaptation. The left side represents failure. Trigger words like assign, approve, or instruct reveal a command and control mindset. We are going to break down the 4 specific situational traps where this traditional logic fails the Scrum framework. Recognizing and unlearning these ingrained reflexes is the only reliable way to systematically eliminate incorrect options and pinpoint the specific PMI-aligned response. Trap number 1 is treating the Scrum Master role as a direct replacement for a traditional project manager. Look at this inverted pyramid. A Scrum Master does not sit at the top issuing orders. They sit at the base. Notice how arrows radiate upward. They serve and enable the product owner, developers, and wider organization. If an exam option suggests assigning daily tasks, evaluating performance metrics, or approving team leave, you have found a trap. There is also a temptation to pick the hero Scrum Master, who swoops in to personally solve every technical glitch the team encounters. Doing the actual work for the developers creates a toxic dependency that halts their ability to self-manage. The correct answer describes a Scrum Master who observes the process, facilitates necessary discussions, and coaches the developers so they can resolve their own impediments. Any option that grants a Scrum Master positional authority over the developers breaks team self-management. Toss it out immediately. The second trap misinterprets the product owner as a simple spokesperson for whichever customer or stakeholder speaks the loudest. This seesaw illustrates the actual accountability of the product owner. They act as the central fulcrum to maximize overall product value. Customer demands are heavy, but must be balanced against competing constraints, like business strategy, operational risks, and regulatory compliance. Stakeholders provide necessary input and influence the direction of the product. They do not dictate priorities. If an executive storms in mid-sprint, demanding an immediate feature change, and the option suggests squeezing it in to keep the peace, that is an automatic failure. The proper protocol is for the product owner to sit down with the developers and evaluate the request to see if the sprint backlog can adapt without blowing up the existing sprint goal. The product owner is the sole decision maker for backlog ordering. Yielding that specific authority to external demands breaks the entire value delivery engine of Scrum. Our third trap stems from the predictive assumption that an authority figure must distribute daily tasks to ensure the work actually gets done. This graphic compares the two approaches. The top half shows a traditional push system, where a manager directs workers from above. Scrum uses the pull system below. Developers are self-managing professionals. They pull work from the sprint backlog, coordinating task allocation internally. If you see the word assigned in any exam question regarding sprint execution, you are almost certainly looking at a trap. Because developers are the only ones who possess the technical expertise to do the work, they hold exclusive accountability for estimating the required effort and deciding who does what. High-performing developers operate with collective ownership. They ask how they can help the team achieve the sprint goal, rather than waiting to be told what their individual task is. Management assigns work. Scrum teams pull work. Any external assignment is a direct violation of their developer autonomy. The fourth trap catches organizations that claim to practice Agile, but secretly maintain isolated functional departments within a single sprint. Passing work linearly from a development team to a testing team, then to a UX team, creates continuous bottlenecks. Scrum mandates no subteams. On the right, the team is a single, intertwined unit, collectively possessing all necessary skills to deliver. This unified group is governed by the definition of done, an uncompromising quality standard that every piece of work must meet. Delaying testing until all the coding finishes is incorrect. A true Scrum team utilizes continuous integration, where testers and designers validate the work concurrently as it is being built. Just like loose threads braiding into a single climbing rope, cross-functional skills weave together simultaneously to create an unbreakable, completed increment. If a scenario suggests skipping security or testing to release a feature faster for a VIP client, choosing that option will fail the question. The team shares one accountability for a completed increment. Perceived speed can never supersede the collective definition of done. The hardest questions on the exam will leave you staring at two choices that both sound like valid Agile practices. When that happens, you need a strict escalation tool to break the tie. This PMP exam quick review framework filters out command and control logic. First is leadership focused on coaching. Second is execution self-managed by developers. Third is the product owner maximizing long-term value. Fourth is the team cohesive without functional silos. When escalating a tight scenario, you protect people first by fostering psychological safety. Then you enforce strict role accountability, and only then do you optimize for process transparency or short-term value. Remember the core attitude required for test day. You must choose collaboration over control and coaching over command. By running every confusing scenario through these specific agile filters, you bypass your predictive reflexes, neutralize the exam traps, and identify the exact response PMI expects you to choose.
Before we finish, let's reinforce one of the most important PMP exam skills: recognizing Scrum myths. Many incorrect answer choices sound reasonable because they reflect traditional project management thinking rather than Scrum. The first myth is that the Scrum Master assigns work. In Scrum, developers organize their own work. The Scrum Master enables the team instead of directing it. Next, the product owner does not manage developers. Their accountability is to maximize product value by ordering the product backlog. Another common misconception is that developers are only programmers. In Scrum, a developer is any professional who contributes to creating a usable increment. Quality is also a shared responsibility. There is no separate quality gate at the end of the sprint. Developers collectively build quality into every increment. When it comes to estimation, the product owner explains value, but only developers estimate the effort because they understand the technical complexity. Finally, remember that the Scrum Master is not a traditional project manager. Their role is to coach, facilitate, remove impediments, and help the Scrum team become more effective. Whenever you encounter a PMP situational question, ask yourself, does this option empower the team, respect accountabilities, and enable rather than control? If the answer is yes, you're much closer to the PMI mindset. Definition of done versus release. Many PMP candidates confuse definition of done with release, but they are not the same thing. Let's walk through the flow. First, developers build the solution. As they work, quality is built into every step, not inspected at the very end. When the work satisfies all agreed quality criteria, it meets the definition of done. This means the increment is complete, tested, integrated, and usable according to the team's quality standards. At this point, the increment becomes potentially releasable. In other words, it's technically ready to be released at any time. But here's the key distinction. Being done does not automatically mean it will be released. The decision to release is a business decision, not a technical one. The product owner, together with appropriate stakeholders, decides when releasing the increment delivers the greatest value to customers and the organization. For the PMP exam, remember these two golden rules. Every released increment must satisfy the definition of done. But not every done increment must be released immediately. Whenever you're unsure, separate technical quality from business timing. The definition of done answers the question, is the increment complete and usable? The release decision answers a different question, is this the right time to deliver maximum value? That's the PMI mindset. Quality comes first, value determines release. Why Empiricism Wins, the Scrum way of working. One of the biggest mindset shifts in Agile is understanding why Scrum relies on empiricism instead of predictive planning. Traditional project management works best when the future is relatively predictable. You create a detailed plan, execute it, monitor progress, and correct deviations from that plan. This approach aims to optimize for certainty. But Scrum starts with a different assumption. It recognizes that in today's complex and fast-changing environments, we simply can't predict everything up front. Requirements evolve, customer needs change, and new information emerges continuously. That's why Scrum is built on empiricism, making decisions based on what we learn, not what we assume. At the heart of Scrum are three powerful pillars. First is transparency. Everyone can clearly see the work, the progress, and any obstacles. Good decisions begin with visible information. Next comes inspection. The team regularly reviews both the product and the way they work, identifying what's working well and what needs improvement. Finally, there's adaptation. When inspection reveals a better path, the team adjusts quickly instead of rigidly following an outdated plan. These three pillars form a continuous learning cycle. Every sprint provides new knowledge, helping the team improve the product, refine its processes, and deliver greater value over time. Why does this matter? Because empiricism embraces uncertainty instead of resisting it. It uncovers risks early, enables faster learning, empowers self-managing teams, and builds resilience in the face of change. For the PMP exam, remember this simple contrast. Predictive projects optimize for certainty. Scrum optimizes for learning. Whenever you encounter a situational question, look for the answer that promotes transparency, inspection, adaptation, and continuous learning rather than strict command and control. That's the agile mindset PMI expects, and it's why empiricism wins. The 5 Scrum values, the heartbeat of every sprint. So far, we've explored Scrum roles, artifacts, and empiricism. But beneath all of those practices lies something even more fundamental, the 5 Scrum values. These values shape how Scrum teams think, collaborate, and make decisions. In fact, many PMP situational questions are really testing these values, even if they're never mentioned explicitly. Let's look at each one. First is commitment. Commitment means every team member is personally dedicated to achieving the sprint goal and supporting the team's shared objectives. It isn't about working longer hours, it's about honoring commitments and helping the team succeed. Second is focus. Scrum teams focus on the most valuable work that helps achieve the sprint goal. They minimize distractions, avoid unnecessary multitasking, and learn to say no to work that doesn't support the team's objective. Third is openness. Transparency begins with openness. Team members openly share progress, challenges, risks, and feedback. Problems aren't hidden, they're surfaced early so the team can inspect, adapt, and improve. Fourth is respect. Scrum recognizes that every team member brings valuable skills and perspectives. People trust one another, value different opinions, and collaborate as professionals working toward a common goal. Finally, courage. Courage means speaking up when something isn't right, raising impediments early, experimenting with better solutions, and making difficult decisions when necessary. Continuous improvement requires the courage to challenge the status quo. Why do these values matter for the PMP exam? Because values drive behaviors, and behaviors determine outcomes. When you're faced with 2 seemingly correct answers, ask yourself, which option demonstrates commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage? The PMI-aligned answer is usually the one that strengthens trust, encourages collaboration, respects people, and helps the team deliver value together. Remember this simple principle. Scrum isn't just a framework of roles and events, it's a culture built on values. When pressure increases, these 5 values keep the team aligned, trusted, and focused on delivering value. And that's exactly the mindset PMI expects you to demonstrate on the exam. PMP situational question, solved. Applying the 6-point agile filter. Let's put everything we've learned into practice with a realistic PMP situational question. Imagine you're halfway through Sprint 5. A senior executive approaches the Scrum Master and says, "We have a critical production issue. I need you to assign 2 developers immediately to fix it and report back by the end of the day." What should the Scrum Master do? At first glance, several answers sound reasonable. But instead of reacting emotionally, let's apply our 6-point agile filter. First, who owns this decision? The Scrum Master does not assign work. Developers are self-managing, so any option asking the Scrum Master to direct individual developers immediately violates Scrum Accountabilities. Second, are accountabilities respected? The product owner is responsible for maximizing product value, while developers decide how to accomplish the sprint goal. We must preserve those role boundaries. Third, does the option support self-management? The correct answer empowers the developers to determine how they will respond rather than having someone assign tasks to them. Fourth, does it maximize product value? A production issue may indeed affect customer value, so the product owner should be involved in evaluating the business impact and deciding priorities. Fifth, does it preserve empiricism? Instead of making a top-down decision, the Scrum team should inspect the situation together, discuss the options transparently, and adapt based on what they learn. Finally, does it respect Scrum commitments? Any response should protect the current sprint goal and avoid disrupting the team's commitments without proper collaboration and evaluation. Now let's evaluate the options. Option A is incorrect because it has the Scrum Master assigning developers directly. Option B is also incorrect because it suggests the Scrum Master, not the Scrum team, will decide what happens. Option D overreacts by escalating the issue to human resources. This is a product and delivery discussion, not a personnel issue. That leaves option C. The Scrum Master explains Scrum Accountabilities, facilitates a discussion with the product owner, and allows the developers to determine how to respond within the sprint. This option respects Scrum roles, supports self-management, involves the product owner where product value is concerned, preserves empiricism, and protects the sprint goal unless the team collectively determines that adaptation is necessary. This is exactly how PMI expects you to think. Whenever you're unsure, don't ask yourself, who can solve the problem the fastest? Instead ask, which option empowers the team, respects accountabilities, preserves empiricism, and delivers value through collaboration? If you use that mindset consistently, you'll eliminate many incorrect answers before you even compare the remaining options.